Welcome back everyone, Seraphin here. In my previous video, I did a comprehensive summary of the Tangzhong or Yudane method, exploring the many essential facts about this method, explaining some of the basics, highlighting the features, and covering many more things. While I tried to cover as much as possible, I have to admit though, there were some important details that I had to skip in order to achieve a more coherent presentation. So starting today, I'm going to address some of the in-depth details on Tangzhong that I didn't cover, one topic at a time. Let's start with, why is my Tangzhong bread gummy and sticky? Here are a few things we need to check if we end up with a gummy Tangzhong bread. Among the most important items to check are improper preparation of the Tangzhong, too much water or overhydration, over-kneading, under-baking, and under-proofing. Okay, let's analyze these items one by one. The first thing we want to look at is the improper preparation of Tangzhong, so basically when we make it the wrong way. As I mentioned in my previous video, overcooking or using too much boiling water to make the Tangzhong can practically inactivate lots of beta amylase enzymes in the Tangzhong. This will usually result in less natural sweetness and flavor, which for some people may not matter much because that's not what they're looking for, like if they were mostly using Tangzhong as a way to manage extremely high hydration doughs, or if they were planning on adding a lot of sugar, rendering any additional sweetness unnecessary. But this can be a serious issue when we raise the flour for our Tangzhong beyond the level of 20%. Here's the explanation. Our wheat flour usually comes with a small amount of alpha amylase enzyme and considerably more beta amylase enzymes. Recipes over the years have been prepared to more or less take this balance into account. Improper preparation of Tangzhong can alter this balance pretty significantly. The fact that alpha amylase has a higher tolerance to high temperatures when compared to beta amylase, which is more sensitive to higher temperatures, can shift the balance between the two. Knowing how enzymes work, the fact that they are not part of the product means that they can be reused again and again. So a small imbalance can eventually lead to millions more chemical reactions that favor one enzyme over the other, in this case favoring alpha amylase. We know that it is the cooperation of the two that produce the desired reducing sugar maltose that we are looking for in a Tangzhong bread. Instead of maltose, more alpha amylase enzymes can lead to greatly increased dextrin formation. An excessive amount of dextrin in bread has been shown to result in extended softness and excessive stickiness, hence a gummy bread. So that's one way improper preparation of Tangzhong can result in a gummy and sticky Tangzhong bread. Now let's talk about another aspect, excessive hydration. If you've been following the guidelines that I mentioned in my previous video, I think you can safely cross out excessive hydration. As a reference here, I'll repeat what I said, taken from the scientific paper. For optimal dough development, soft bread made of bread flour, 14% moisture content, has a water absorption level of 68% baker's percentage for control, which simply means no Yudane was incorporated. Then 71% for Yudane 20 and 74% for Yudane 40. I'm of course referring to this excellent paper. These numbers might need some adjustment depending on the flour you're using, but they're a good way to figure out how much water is needed for optimum hydration of a dough with varying percentages of Tangzhong. For any percentage of Tangzhong in between the ones listed in the study, I just interpolate as I explained in my previous video. As for lean doughs that require prolonged baking under high temperatures, I usually push the hydration higher based on the guidelines from this paper. Again, I make use of a simple interpolation on the data given by this paper. In one of my previous videos, I've covered this in detail. I'm not going to say it again here, but basically what we learned from this paper is that our Tangzhong or Yudane 20 can be considered as an imaginary model WS14 in this research. Model WS20 behaves better than the control even with the hydration raised to 80%. Our Tangzhong or Yudane 20, being on the left side of it, can be expected to perform just as well if the hydration is raised to above 70%. If we use Tangzhong or Yudane 20, our dough with a hydration above 70% should be expected to perform as if it is a dough with about 60% hydration. This number is actually in accordance with the result from the previous paper we referred to, so that in itself is quite a reassurance. I've been basing my recipes on the data from these two papers, and the results have been very satisfactory. I haven't even pushed the hydration even higher. For example, I did 100% hydration Tangzhong ciabatta bread and got a very good result. Before continuing though, please be kindly reminded that ultimately my experiment is very subjective and should be taken with a grain of salt. You probably still need to do your own experiments with your own flour and recipes based on the data presented in the papers. Scientific experiments, as I have explained, are mostly done in duplicate, triplicate, and more, and its significance level is usually set before any data collection starts, and is typically set to 5% or much lower. Being a home baker, my experiment and other similar experiments done by many YouTubers are all, in the end, pretty subjective. Change the circumstance, such as flour type and environment, and we might not get the exact same results. It's certainly not as accurate as the data that scientists have spent months and sometimes years meticulously accumulating. That's why I find reading these papers so useful, and I personally think it would be kind of foolish if we didn't claim an elevated seat with a better vantage point by sitting on the shoulders of giants. Okay, next factor in gummy and sticky bread, over-kneading. This can easily take place if you are using a stand mixer. Tangzhong dough has been shown to have a high dough tenacity, but lower overmixing tolerance. Technically, this is indicated by the shorter departure time, lower stability, and smaller mixing tolerance index. This conclusion is from Ke Yiyun's more than 100-page thesis. The thesis has a very comprehensive range of data on Tangzhong. It covers many areas of interest, including this one. Overmixing or overkneading happens not because we have no idea about the high dough tenacity of a Tangzhong dough, but rather exactly because we know this, we tend to let the mixer run for longer. And then there, right before our very eyes, we see the dough break down and change from an elastic dough into a dough with a lower viscosity, making it more liquid-like. It rarely happens when we knead the Tangzhong dough by hand because we can feel the gluten network buildup and usually stop kneading long before the dough breaks down. Within a small range, the dough can recover from overmixing and the gluten can bounce back, but after a certain point, there's no more recovery and the gluten is pretty much ruined. So overkneading is definitely something that we have to pay attention to. As for underbaked bread, this happens to me quite often when I push the hydration of my lean doughs to the extreme. What I keep forgetting is that the internal moisture can take quite a while to migrate out, consequently reaching a temperature above 90 degrees Celsius for the core of the bread can be a real challenge. In this case, proper preheating is a must, and usually after the necessary initial phase of oven spring and crust formation, I like to lower the temperature and let the bread bake slowly for longer until I can ascertain that the core has been fully baked. These simple steps usually save the bread and the day. Underproofing is another common mistake that anyone new to Tangzhong bread can end up overlooking. Multiple research papers have shown that Tangzhong or Yudane doughs have less gassing power, weaker gas retention, and most importantly here, that the doughs require a longer final proofing. Depending on the dough condition, this can range from a few minutes to way longer. We tend to forget about this when dealing with the final proofing because our previous experience with non-Tangzhong breads might shape our intuition that this kind of bread needs a certain duration of proofing, and when the time is up, we go on to bake it thinking it's properly proofed. Then, having been miserably misled, we end up with a gummy bread. So my best advice is to use visual observation to decide on whether the proofing is done or not. Poke tests, as I've found out in many cases, are actually not a very effective way in telling the readiness of our dough. There can be quite a few factors that make the poke tests ineffective, including high hydration, weaker doughs, as well as whether the dough has been retarded or not, etc. So those were a few tips on how to overcome a gummy Tangzhong bread. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Would love to hear you share your experiences. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching, and bye!